Is the European Union democratic? Well, yes, but actually no. Now this question resurfaces every once in a while and is currently the subject of a lot of active discussion, especially after Elon Musk said that the EU must be disbanded. So I figured I'd make this video and try to explain to you the simple and yet extremely complicated question of whether the EU is democratic or not. And I have to start by explaining a little bit about what the EU is. Now don't worry, I'm not going to go into a 3-hour lecture explaining the entire history of the European Union going back, all these years. I'm just going to kind of correct the misconceptions and explain to you why the European Union is such a democratic alliance of nation states and yet sometimes seems to function as the exact opposite of that. So what is the EU? Well, at its core, it's a treaty. It's all the member states getting together and signing this document that explains how the European Union functions. There have been treaties since its inception as the European Coal and Steel Community, and today we have an actual treaty, which is the Lisbon Treaty signed in 2007. Now, the Lisbon Treaty isn't the only treaty that is in place right now. I mean, there's also the Treaty on the European Union and the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union. Those two treaties are the ones that define the workings and how it works and how it functions and what institutions there are and all that stuff. The Lisbon Treaty is the one that changes those two treaties into what they are today, into what the European Union in fact is today. Now, the Treaty on the European Union is more general. It sets kind of objectives and priorities, and the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union explains the day-to-day workings. Confused? You should be. That's kind of the point here that I'm trying to make. And you will notice this pattern as we go along, where, the treaties are signed by the member states. You have the signatures of the prime ministers, the presidents, I think sometimes even the kings under the Lisbon Treaty. And yet it's so complicated, it amends the two other treaties. What do they say? What is a TEU? What is a TFEU? You'll notice this pattern as we go along. So what do these treaties actually establish? Well, they create the framework of the several institutions of the European Union that dictate the policy. Now, for those of you familiar with how the EU works, I am aware that there's also the European Court of Justice, the European Central Bank, the European Court of Auditors, and so on and so forth, but they're not relevant to what we're talking about right now. The institutions that create the laws and that enforce the laws are the three main institutions: the Council of the European Union, the European Commission, and the European Parliament. Now, this is where the EU gets the claws and points back for its democratic accountability and might actually convince you that there's democracy at work here. The Council of the European Union is composed of the ministers of the elected governments of the nation states. They gather on a subject basis in different compositions, and they decide on the laws, they dictate, the policy and so on and so forth. An example would be that all the interior ministers and those that deal with police and law enforcement of the member states gather together to discuss chat control, for example, digital censorship. I mean safeguarding democracy. Please don't censor my video. Thank you very much. And this is the institution where your elected officials, the ones you elected in your country's government, are the ones that dictate how things happen. However, there's also the European Council, which is the gathering of prime ministers and presidents that are kind of the leaders of the country. It does not have a legislative power in that sense, but it does set the agenda for the entire European Union. And it also gets through the tough negotiations, such as funding Ukraine and things like that. Then you have the European Parliament, which is composed of directly elected officials. You have the European elections, you vote in the European elections, people you voted get in the European Parliament, and they vote on the laws. Pretty simple. It functions like any national parliament, pretty much. And it is together with the Council, it forms a so-called co-decision procedure, where they receive the proposals of laws from the European Commission, and they change them, modify them, accept them, and or reject them. They also have to reach a compromise between the two of them. And lastly, you have the European Commission, which is probably the most important institution in this debate. Now, the European Commission is the one that proposes the laws and that enforces them. And this creates the whole idea that the European Union is governed by unelected officials who dictate all the policy, who take all the decisions, who do all the important things. And this is where people go wrong. Actually, the European Commission is not unelected at all. Now, the president of the European Commission is proposed by the European Council. It's proposed it's proposed by the country's leaders on reaching a consensus that's based on the results of the European elections. And even then, the president of the Commission has to go in front of the European Parliament, and the European Parliament has to approve the president of the Commission. Not just that, but each commissioner, which is each person in charge of a policy area in the European Commission, is proposed by the government of the nation states and also has to pass approval through parliament, and parliament can even ask them things and ask promises of them and all those sorts of things. So people say they're unelected officials, but they're actually very elected because they pass not just one kind of democratic check, but two or even three, depending on how you look at it. And also when people say that the Commission is kind of the ones that are in the real power behind the European Union, that's wrong. That's just plain wrong. I mean, if you're a poor Eastern European country, you rely on European funds, so the Commission can actually kind of twist your arm a little bit. It has some power over you, but otherwise not really. I mean, if you're one of the countries that contributes to the budget, what's it gonna do? You're the one paying, right? I mean, they can't do anything. The Commission itself has some power, as I said, but not so much. The Council is the one that has the real power. The Council is where the real kind of European sovereignty is pulled together, because the Council represents the governments. The governments can actually do things. They actually have power. They represent their citizens. And not just that, but kind of all the appointments of the European Union happen through the national governments. Even the European Court of Justice is composed of judges that are proposed, they're nominated by the nation states governments. The commissioners are nominated by the nation states governments. The president of the European Commission is upon reaching a consensus of the nation states. And I mean, each nation also has the power of veto over the most important policy areas. A single nation can wield a lot of power compared to the European Commission. I mean, Viktor Orban and Hungary is a small country and it's officially the poorest in the European Union. And even then, he is able to influence EU policy a lot because he has 53% votes behind him. He has the popular support and he represents a country rather than the European Commission. And you may be asking yourself, wasn't Ursula von der Leyen like a significant power within the European Union? Yeah, kind of. But that's not because the European Commission is powerful. It's because she happened to be in charge at a time when Merkel left a huge vacuum of power within the EU. And not just that, but France was weak, Macron was unpopular, and Germany was under a very weak leader in the name of Olaf Scholz. So that's why Ursula ended up having way more power and way more kind of sway than she should have. But how does policy work? How does the European Union pass through laws? Is that democratic? Now, again, I'm not going to go into detail. It's also very simple at its core. You have the Council setting the priorities, then you have the Commission creating proposals for laws based on those priorities. They go to the European Parliament and the Council of the European Union, and they modify them, they change them, and they reject them or accept them. That's basically it. That's kind of the gist of the European Union and how it works. And as you can see, that's also quite democratic. I mean, it goes from your elected governments to the people they appointed, and then back to elected officials that have the final say on European Union policy. Like they can just straight up reject it if they want, and you directly elected those people. Even on transparency, it's pretty good. I mean, the European Union has, like in the treaty, in the TFEU, there's these provisions where all European Union documents and all that stuff must be publicly available. There really are websites where you can find all that stuff. You can even watch all the meetings on video. And on paper, as you can see, it's very democratic. Everything passes so many checks. Everything is, back to the elected officials. Everything is under control. It should be quite democratic, except it doesn't really end up working that way. And here's the reason why some people seem to think it's not democratic and why they have actually a point here. I mean, there is a point that it's not exactly as democratic as it should be. The EU is beyond complicated. It is beyond complicated. I mean, I told you in the beginning of this video about a European institution that I repeated quite a couple of times. So here's a little task that I used to give the interns that came to the office once upon a time. I will list 3 institutions. One of those is an NGO, one of those is a legislative branch of the European Union, and one of those is a consultative body. Which is which? The European Council, the Council of the European Union, and the Council of Europe. Well, the Council of Europe is an NGO, the Council of the European Union is a legislative branch body, and the European Council has mostly consultative powers. I actually had to look that up again just to make sure I'm not mistaken, even though I've worked there, because you can just get so confused by these things. The European Parliament has 24 committees and 2 subcommittees, and it has a delegation for random regions of the world. The Council has 10 configurations. The Commission has 45 directorate generals, I mean, there's not even 45 commissioners. Some commissioners are in charge of more than one Directorate General. Just for reference, there's a Director General for Economic and Financial Affairs, one for Financial Stability and Capital Markets, one for Internal Market and Industry, and one for Taxation. And no, it's not a single commissioner that's in charge of those. They're different ones. You're thinking like, holy crap, this gives new meaning to the words Byzantine bureaucracy, but I'm not even telling you the half of it. Do you remember what I told you that the Council of the European Union is composed of the ministers? That's not even all of it. I mean, because there's a whole new body, a whole other body that's called Coreper, that is composed of another whole new layer of kind of EU bureaucracy, which is the permanent representations. They are embassies of the countries to the European Union. So not embassies to Belgium, but embassies to the European Union itself. And Coreper is a gathering of these like permanent representatives that prepare the work of the Council of the European Union. They kind of draft the agenda, they set what's going to be discussed, and so on and so forth. And as I'm recording this, I kind of had to check now whether, because I'm not even sure whether they also prepare the work of the European Council, when the prime ministers and presidents gather. And just for the sake of this video, I am not going to look it up. So you should be aware, I work there, I researched this video, and I'm not even sure about a point in it. And you're thinking like, what a clusterfuck, right? Nobody could follow what these institutions do, but this is not even all of it. Let's talk about the European Parliament, the one you should be familiar with because you can vote for that one directly. So, I mean, you should be at least aware of what it does. Now, the European Parliament was involved in about 415 ordinary legislative procedures during the last parliamentary term. There were about 43 files on the consultation procedure and 13 files on consent procedure and about 449 files on non-legislative procedures. And now you're thinking like, wait a second, there's procedures as well? Yes, there are procedures as well, and they're different. And there's even opinions and resolutions. As I said, as I'm talking to you, do you realize we're talking about 1,000 plus kind of laws and documents and so on? And out of these, I'd say during a single term, about 10 maybe are important to citizens and noteworthy. This in itself also creates another massive problem because most of the laws are very niche, very arcane in a way. And that means that the citizens will never give an opinion on them, and lobbyists can then swing in and give the only consultative opinion that politicians will get. It gives a lot more power to lobbyists and to lobbying groups than it does to citizens. That's a bit of a problem that the EU has with lobbyists, but that's another deep issue that, I mean, nobody's actually solved the lobbying issue, have they? I mean, the US has a bigger lobbying problem than we do. I should mention that AI kind of gave up telling me the exact number of procedures when I kept asking like, yeah, okay, but how many resolutions, how many opinions, and just like that. There's no serious data or whatever. There is data, but I think AI just gave up. I think it started looking up all this data and I was like, oh fuck, it doesn't matter anyway. The whole point is that you cannot follow this. I mean, a single law also takes about 20 months to become a law. That's the average duration of a legislative procedure. I mean, who's going to follow a law for 20 months? And I'm giving myself a bit of a headache here with all this. I'm confusing myself. I'm not even sure if everything I've told you is correct. I gotta look over my notes. I'm pretty sure. I'll look after the video and I'll cut out stuff if it's not correct. But you do get the gist of it, right? I mean, it is democratic, but it's way too complicated for you to practice democracy on it and to have some sort of accountability towards its citizens. So I'm just going to give my opinion on it, and I'm going to say that the debate is based on a lot of misinformation. It's based on the misinformation that the European Commission has is formed of unelected officials that don't answer to anyone, and that's not true. Everything answers to your government. But on the face of it, it's just too complicated to practice all the democracy. I do, however, place the blame on the people. I do, however, think that it's due to the people not exercising their right of democracy and so on. Yeah, sure, it's complicated. Yeah, sure, you're not gonna understand anything, but people don't even make the effort to understand the basic functionings of these things. I'm sure some of you might have lived in the European Union, some of you are interested in politics, but you weren't aware of everything I told you in this video. And the things I told you in this video are pretty simple to figure out. It's pretty simple to figure out that your government is the one that's exercising all your rights and is the one setting the agenda and all those things of the European Union. And you can hold your government accountable. How many people in the European Union think about the fact that a party in their government, for example, signed the treaty and they keep that accountable? Under the treaty, the Bulgarian signature is the Socialist Party, I believe, but I don't think anybody's ever thought to themselves like, the socialists are at the core of all this. They're responsible for the way the EU works. Nobody thinks about that. There's this phenomenon that exists in the European Union that we all know about. People who used to work there, where in the Council of the European Union, you have governments, that in their nation, they'll oppose something. They'll say like, no, this is not okay, this is not good. And then they'll go to the council and they'll vote it in. And then they'll go back to their nation and they say, well, Brussels is making us do that. Brussels made us do that. We don't want to, but Brussels made us do that. And that's how they pass unpopular votes. There are cases where a nation has actually opposed it at the nation level and then proposed it in Brussels, using it as a sort of a blockage because they know nobody's going to check and nobody's going to keep them responsible. Chat control is a very good example of that. Nobody in the EU wanted it. A lot of governments voted for it, and yet nobody told the political party that was in government at the time, like, you guys are voting for it. I know nobody in Bulgaria did. I tried to make a case out of it. Nobody cared. Nobody really tied the two things together, even though it was our government that voted for chat control, for all that stuff. And the EU does certain things that, extend an olive branch of democracy, such as that during the elections, the kind of nominations for Commission President are presented beforehand. And they even had a debate, by the way. So when people say like, where did Ursula von der Leyen come from? Who elected her? And so on and so forth. Well, she was in every nation state. She had a debate with the other heads of the Commission. You could very easily see all the bullshit that she was saying. You could see the fact that she was the one in charge of green policy that she was then saying that she was going to fix, and people just didn't care. Nobody watched it. Nobody cared about it. So, when you say it's not democratic, well, yeah, nobody's actually trying to make it democratic. And as I said at the very start of this video, everything is based on treaties. Like, the whole issue of the European Union is based on the fact that it's a treaty that was signed in 2007. In 2007, and it was like discussed in 2005, 2006, and so on. During those times, the European Union was like wealthy beyond belief. It was the wealthiest place in the world, It was like, I don't think we were ahead of the US, but we were starting to surpass the US. Like, everything was perfect, There was no huge demographic crisis. There was no refugee crisis, no financial crisis, no nothing. So the way that it was designed was with the idea that why would you ever even question it, Like, why would you care? Why would you hold it accountable? Everything's perfect. Everything's going fine. We're all rich. Everything's great. We're the envy of the world. So that's why it functions like it does. Because right after the Lisbon Treaty, you had the financial crisis. The European Union started having a demographic crisis, the refugee crisis, and all those things. We still haven't recovered. And we have an energy crisis, sort of, I guess. We now even have like a foreign policy crisis. And we're still working on the treaty that was signed during peace and prosperity. But treaties are signed by the member states. If you don't vote, if you don't care, then nobody's going to propose a new treaty. And you should be aware that we're quite overdue for a treaty because the Lisbon Treaty is the longest serving treaty in the history of the European Union. We are outdated, and that's because people don't care. Again, I'm going to say it's too complicated. I know you don't understand it. I know people don't understand it. But at the face of it, people just don't care. They don't care to understand it. So 50-50, right? Great balance then to the video. So nobody's going to be able to accuse me of threatening democracy and censor me. And nobody's going to accuse me of being a pro-EU shill or whatever you want. So anyway, I hope you learned something today. I hope it didn't give you a headache explaining all this stuff. And I hope I corrected a couple of the misconceptions of the EU, because God knows there's a lot of them. They deserve it because they don't do a very good job of explaining and simplifying, but there's a lot of misinformation. And I urge you, if you are European, if you care about this, to take half an hour every once in a while, just see what it's up to. You see some news about the EU, read it. If people like this video, if people care about this stuff, I pledge that I will make regular videos explaining EU policies. I will make videos on the elections, explaining to you all the candidates. I will give you all the information you need, and it'll take like 10-15 minutes every couple of weeks. That's it. And all you have to do is put on a video, and you will be informed, and you will participate, and everything will be fixed. Everything will be perfect, right? We'll have a new treaty. We'll get richer than the Americans again, and So do all the usual stuff, comment, like, subscribe, all those things, and especially please comment, because I usually do videos in Bulgarian. I have no idea how this is going to work out, And well, if people watch this and have some interest in EU policy, I guess I'll see you next time. Take care.